What's up guys, Asian here again with another PTS video, and today we're going to be talking about the Magicka Sorcerer. Specifically, we're going to be talking about petsorcs. So, petsorcs, as of the Wrathstone PTS, have now, their pets, inherit a couple of your base traits. So, pets already online right now inherit your crit chance and your crit damage. However, there were changes in Wrathstone that basically allowed them to also inherit your CP modifiers, any sort of damage done modifiers you might have, and things like that. The only thing they will not inherit is going to be your spell damage. That's just because their damage calculation does not really take into consideration spell damage at all. In order for the pets to take into consideration spell damage, you basically have to completely redo the damage calculation for the pets themselves. So the big question is, does this act as a buff, or is it just kind of like more or less the same for petsorcs? Because pets already can actually be affected by things like minor berserk through combat prayer and things like that. So really the only difference here between live and the Wrathstone PTS is the addition of your CP modifiers, things like Elfborn, or I guess Elfborn's are already inherited through crit chance, but things like Elemental Expert. So it's a little bit difficult to test this from live onto PTS because of all the changes that have happened on the PTS, particularly the racial passive. So it's very difficult to get an exact one-to-one comparison between what petsorcs can pull on live versus what they can pull on the PTS. But I did try my best to kind of get as close as I can a one-to-one comparison between the two of them. So right now I am on the PTS. So this is kind of my testing setup here. So I pretty much mimicked everything that I had on the live server. So that's why not all of this is in gold, and that's why some things are not necessarily in the ideal traits, or I don't have the ideal sets. So I have 2-piece Lambus, medium heavy. Then I have 5-piece Burning Spellweave on my body, all gold, all divines. So everything here is divines, all Magicka enchants. Then I had Mother's Sorrow jewelry with arcane, all spell damage. And then Mother's Sorrow Inferno Staff infused flame damage, and then Maelstrom Inferno Staff infused with a weapon damage enchant. And basically this was what I currently have on live right now. So this basically kept the gear identical between live and the PTS. Now, like I said earlier, it's very difficult to get one-to-one comparison because of all the racial changes. So my Sorc on live is a Breton, so that's why I am a Breton here. And then as for bars, Crystal Frags, Ellie Weapon, Bound Aegis, Endless Fury, Inner Light, Fiery Rage. Again, these are my bars on live, or I should say, this is a non-petsorc build, but for petsorc it would be Volatile Familiar here. I forgot I was also testing this against the non-petsorc. So again, these bars are from live. So on a PTS right now, you actually wouldn't be using Fiery Rage. You'd probably end up using something like Meteor instead, or even the additional Storm Atronach, Greater Storm Atronach, double bar that, just because you no longer need the Destruction Staff Ultimate to get that Ancient Knowledge passive. Then back bar, Spell Symmetry, Liquid Lightning, Familiar again, Blockade, Ellie Drain, and then Greater Storm Atronach. So again, these bars are exactly what I have on live server. Now on the live server, not all of my abilities are completely leveled up. I don't believe my Elemental Weapon is leveled up entirely, and I don't believe I have Spell Symmetry leveled up entirely either. Neither do I have the Greater Storm Atronach. So that's just something to keep in mind when we take a look at the results here. Again, it's going to be hard to kind of make a complete draw a definitive conclusion just because of these Breton passives were changed. So on live right now I have 10% max Magicka, and I have 3% Magicka cost reduction versus 7% cost reduction and 2,000 additional Magicka. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to conclusively say whether this was a nerf or a buff, but nonetheless we can still take a look at the numbers. So we're going to hop over now to the numbers themselves, and we can go ahead and take a look at basically what it all boiled down to. Again, because it's very difficult, because of all the changes in the racial passives, it's hard to make a one-to-one comparison. So on the left we have the petsorc as I currently pulled it on live. In the middle is Wrathstone PTS, and then on the far right is the non-petsorc in Wrathstone, just to kind of give a point of comparison between non-pet builds currently on the PTS. Again, the ones that we're really taking a look at are going to be these two right here. This one here is just kind of a point of comparison to compare what petsorcs and non-petsorcs are able to pull on Wrathstone PTS, just to kind of give you guys an idea of which sorc spec is going to be a little bit stronger once Wrathstone is released. So you can see here that generally speaking, it was a small buff to petsorcs on Wrathstone PTS. I did not actually do the math to give you the exact percentage increase. So we're looking at about 1.9% increase in DPS. Again, these are self-buffed tests, so we're not getting major force, we're not getting warhorn resource buffs, we're not getting minor sorcery or anything like that. These are only buffs we're able to provide for ourselves. We are getting minor prophecy, for example, but not minor sorcery like I mentioned earlier. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt there. In theory, this gap should widen a little bit as we get these raid buffs, so that's just something to keep in mind, especially now that the pet itself does inherit other buffs that you have on your character itself, so you don't necessarily need to hit it with something like Combat Prayer in order to give it minor berserk. As long as you get minor berserk, the pet should also get minor berserk as well. So overall, it is going to be a slight buff. Now again, it's hard to say whether that is from the changes to the Breton passives or to the pets in themselves. Chances are though it's probably to the pets themselves, just because max resources is generally going to be a small nerf from live to Wrathstone. You can very clearly test it out yourself. And then as for sustain, Sorc sustain is still really bad, at least compared to other Magicka classes. I still had to spell sim several times, a little bit more often on live versus on Wrathstone, but I still had to use spell sim several times during the parse in order to make sure I didn't run out of Magicka. And this was with the same food, so I was still using Ghastly Eyeball, the ice cream food for the max Magicka, and the orbs simulation. So yeah, Sorc sustain is still pretty poor overall, so that's just something that you're going to want to keep in mind if you are playing Sorcs. The sustain situation here has not gotten any better. If I did want to fully sustain on a Breton, which arguably has the best sustain out of all the different magic classes right now, I'd probably have to use an Absorb Magicka Ninja on my back bar if I wanted to sustain a full light attack rotation, and even with that, I'm not 100% certain if I'd actually be able to do so. I still need to play around a little bit with the Magicka DPS to kind of see what the best setup is going to be. This is more for builds, less so for any sort of theory crafting things, but yeah, Sorc sustain is not so hot compared to the other Magicka DPS. A lot of the other Magicka DPS classes, Nightblades, Wardens, and Templars, they're all able to basically sustain or almost completely sustain a full light attack rotation without using spell symmetry or balance at all. But overall, it does seem like petsorcs did get a nice buff, at least compared to the non-petsorcs. Pets have generally gotten slight buffs here and there, the biggest buff being the fact that they are no longer affected or targeted by certain in-trial mechanics, so things like against the Serpent, the World Shaper, things like that. They won't die anymore, they're basically invulnerable. So petsorcs at the very least do seem to be a little bit stronger than non-petsorcs. Again, the gap is not that big, again it's probably around 2% or so if I'm just eyeballing the math real quick. And theoretically, this gap should increase when we add in raid buffs. So overall, it does seem like petsorcs are about probably going to be, with raid buffs, maybe 2 or 3k higher than non-petsorcs, enough to kind of somewhat justify using a petsorc over a non-petsorc. But even then, petsorcs do have worse sustain overall, so I will be going over the pros and cons with pets versus non-pets again in a later video. So that is it for this video. If you guys have anything else you would like me to test on the PTS, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, regardless of whether that is stamina or magic DPS or even support roles. I'll be sure to take a look at the comments and pick out a couple of ideas from you guys there. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.